So, okay, I'm going to try and stop myself talking about myself. Being a coach for decades, people reasonably satisfied typically with what you do. They're after bring you more work. You feel you're a good coach. You feel that what you're doing brings results. And then up come these two people and say, hey, maybe you've got it wrong for the last 40 years in my case. Maybe you aren't giving people time to think. Maybe you're being too over-enthusiastic and over-helpful. Maybe you're disrupting people with your clever questions instead of actually encouraging to find the stillness and space they need to think for themselves. And that makes me think, I'm not having this because I've been doing all right for 40 years. What are the issues there, Rebecca?
Yeah, many. You're right. I think sometimes we get stuck in a way that we're used to, we're familiar with. It works, so why would we change it? You know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, sort of thing. But also, I do think we, as coaches, we have a responsibility to be constantly just checking in and making sure that our practice is best practice, it's up to date. You know, are there new things that come along that we could take and use and things? So, yes, I agree. If you're doing something well, then keep doing it, but also be willing to challenge yourself. We ask our clients to do that, so why aren't we doing that ourselves and stuff? And I think the coaching environment model, the thinking environment model has a lot to offer us as coaches. I mean, the first one of the components is attention. So hopefully as coaches, we already do that. But I do wonder sometimes whether we give full attention to our clients and things. So I think, you know, maybe that's the first one we can revisit. Are we genuinely giving our full attention to our clients when we're coaching with them?
Well, I've got the 10 components to one side because I've got no memory these days. And you're right. Number one is attention. And my additional few words, you know, it's worth a chapter, and short chapters, very short chapters in a book for people with low attention span. Attention says listening with respect, interest and fascination. We've been there and we covered that, but there's, you know, it's right to bring it up because everything about coaching in a thinking environment is based around a substantial, explicit framework. How often do we listen with respect, interest and fascination? Just throw that out there, because if I watch a lot of really well thought of coaches, I think this isn't coaching at all. This is tutoring. This is instruction. This is, yes, in that situation, I did this. And, I remember 38 years ago when I was like this. And I'm like, that's wrong. I am fundamentally questioning the way I've gone about my coaching since 1982.
Wow. I refer back to a quote that I heard once, is every now and then it's good to place a question mark over the things we take for granted. You know, so it is good to just check in and I think this is where these 10 components can really help. Almost use them as a checklist, you know. What score would I give to myself on these different elements, and which ones could I improve, which ones could I, you know, which ones am I pretty strong at? I think that's actually quite a helpful thing to do as coach, just as an exercise for us, you know, just check in. Are we using these elements, and can we use them to make our coaching better?
And again, I'm not trying not to trot out the things we've discussed before putting this together, but we're not presenting ourselves as fundamentalists here. We're not radical, cultish people saying, oh, most coaches have got all this wrong, you've got to do it this way. Because the second of Nancy Klein's 2 components is incisive questions. And that more than implies a role, an active role for a coach in a thinking environment. If you're asking incisive questions, you've got to question yourself, is that incisive, or is that just me asking a question which steers people inappropriately to where I want them to go instead of them? So for me, and from watching videos, for instance, of people who are genuinely and competently coaching in a thinking environment, the incisive questions are things like, have you thought enough about this? Is there more you'd like to think about? Instead of, I remember when I was in so-and-so and it happened to me and you should do this too. Don't you think? That's not an incisive question. That's all about me. I think all about me coaches will never go near this and will dismiss it as being psychobabble.
Yeah, and you know, before we even got talking about the thinking environment model, we've discussed this before, haven't we, in terms of what is coaching and what's the difference between coaching and mentoring and instructing and tutoring, like you said. And so you know, for coaches who are coaching rather than mentoring, I think this is the next step almost, isn't it? You know, and like I said, the incisive questions come as a result of giving that attention. We can only ask incisive questions if we've given the attention first, because otherwise, you know, and I think, like you said, some coaches worry about, oh, I don't know what question to ask next, or, well, you know, was that a really good question or whatever? And that's the difficulty, isn't it? I think if we're listening fully with all our attention, we don't have to worry about the next question. That will just come intuitively.
It's a liberating thing not to have to think about what you're going to say next, because what you say next is typically not going to be anything at all, but might be no more than is the more. Because who's it about? It's not about you, the coach. It's about the person sat in front of you. It's all about them. And the best way to show it's all about them is to give them all the space they need to think about what they most want to say.
Yeah. And I think that sort of leads on to one of the other elements, doesn't it? The ease, you know, that component of ease, offering freedom from rush or urgency. You know, are we genuinely laid back enough to let them just talk and take the whole session if they need to, you know, just on one point? It's their session, not ours as a coach, you know. And I think that's important, isn't it, as well, because you can see when people are wanting to get in and it's almost like they want to say something else and they're going to worry because they haven't got time to say it and everything. So just sitting back and letting it happen and giving that ease is really important as well.
And again, I think of this as yours because you brought it up first in our conversations, and you have done many times. It's not about being an absolutist. It's not about saying, now, hang on a minute, I'm going to this conversation. There's 10 elements to Nancy Klein's time to think framework. So as a thinking environment coach, I've got to do all 10 all the time, always. I've always got to make it clear I'm never going to interrupt. It isn't like that to me. There could be times when it is that, but you've got to clarify that contractually with the client, because maybe the client's saying, hey, what's going on here? This person usually gets in with stories about themselves and tells me things. Now all they're doing is sitting back and looking benign and asking me, where did this come from? You've got to clarify with the client the approach you're taking and find that's acceptable to them. Because maybe the client says, well, I like what you're saying, and I like the respect you're clearly trying to show me. I want a bit of help with this. And then you say, okay, well, maybe this is not going to be what a purist would call a coaching session. Maybe you need a bit of tutoring, a bit of help. So if you're drowning, I'll throw you a life belt. But let's be clear that it's not this. And if it were this, I would be doing it in this way. So I think it's about adding something to the repertoire of a coach rather than changing entirely their practice. When I said earlier, it's causing me to fundamentally question my practice, it is, but it's not going to cause me to jettison certain approaches that work at other times that might work better using this.
Definitely. And I don't think either of us are saying to people, you must incorporate all of these all of the time, are we? And for me, I just think that they're so useful as different elements that if we can incorporate one or two and just take them, that could make a huge difference. So for me, I completely agree with you. I think, you know, and I think that's why I like it as a checklist, is just think, oh, actually, you know what? I don't do that one very well, but I think that would probably make quite a big difference to my clients. I'm going to focus on doing that next time I'm working with this person, and just choose one thing that you know would make a big difference. I think I like that idea of it, and I think that's something that I want to take forwards more myself as a coach.
And again, in terms of my own practice, I think I will, because I haven't yet done so, I think I will, during a conversation, a contact, be saying to a coaching client, I think we're into something quite deep and intense for you at this point. I want at this point to make clear I'm not going to interrupt you. I'm going to give you all the time you need. And that's during a session which might not have had those ground rules throughout the whole contact. But there could be times when, as a coach, you intuitively think, this is the time to shut up. This is the time. And I need to make that clear with the client that that's what I think and get their view. Because maybe the client says, yeah, lovely idea, Andrew, but can you continue to tell me things? Because as you say, it's all about the client, and that's quite restricting sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. I think you're right. And this is where we do sort of need that permission from our client, don't we? And just say, this is what I'm thinking at this point. I think this might help you. Are you happy to try it? you know, and this is the thing, isn't it? We can only try it, and if it works, fantastic, and if it doesn't, then there's no harm in it, you know. And I think it might be something that's different, and I think different things can be uncomfortable at first.
Because what do we do if the client said, if you're saying, okay, right, I'm a Nancy Klein disciple, I get this stuff, this is how I do my coaching practice, and this is the only way I'm going to go about my coaching. And then you come along to Rebecca and say, right, Rebecca, here we are again for our scheduled coaching session. And this time, I'm not going to say a word. I'm just going to wait until you prompt me. And Rebecca says, what the hell's going on here? I've always got a lot of value from you helping me. And my boss says that's really helpful. And then you say, well, I'm afraid if you're not going to do it this way, we're not going to do it at all. So this is not about absolutism. This is not about saying, we must always do all these things. This is about saying, and you're right, as a continuous professional development activity is about broadening your awareness and the new techniques you bring to an existing coaching practice.
Yeah, very much so.